Welcome to the Emisarios Unidos de Luz channel. If you enjoy this near-death experience story, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Now let's start with the story. In my childhood, I had a riding accident that rendered me unconscious for a few minutes, and during that period of unconsciousness, I had a NDE. When I left my body, I remember communicating with an ubiquitous yet invisible intelligence that reminded me who I really am and why I incarnated on Earth. I was reassured by that higher intelligence that the suffering I had caused others while on Earth was forgiven. The intelligence also communicated the importance of forgiveness, reasoning that our ability to forgive affects our happiness as well as the happiness of others. During the NDE, I remember myself and the presence who I have since come to refer to as Michael, laughing joyfully in the experience of sheer happiness and elation as I forgave myself and others. It was Michael himself who shared with me the power of forgiveness, and it was he who explained to me why I and others choose to incarnate on Earth. Michael explained to me that the reason I decided to incarnate on Earth was for the purpose of learning how to summon the will of my higher being and how to act upon that will on Earth. The process of summoning one's will, as he explained, would bring humanity to a new understanding that would allow them to experience the kingdom of God on Earth. Michael explained to me that I incarnated with many others who shared the same purpose and how we planned to unite in love, in order that we would usher in the new world on Earth. In the darkness that surrounded me in my disembodied state, I felt light and free. "You are perfect" was the first thing that Michael communicated to me the moment I left my body. "I am perfect. Nothing can ever hurt me again," I rejoiced. "Nothing could ever have hurt you, to begin with. You are an eternal being," Michael replied, alerting me to his presence. As Michael communicated with me, I could feel his peaceful and calming presence, and in the peace that he exuded, I knew that I could trust him implicitly. "If that is so, why do we live in fear of death?" I asked. "It was necessary that your experience be intensified in a way that convinced you of your mortality and the fragility of your corporeal experience, otherwise, you would never have taken the exercise seriously. As a result, you would never have learned what you made your mission on Earth to learn." "What is my mission?" I asked with curiosity. "You incarnated to learn how to summon your will," he said. "What?" "I chose to incarnate just to decide on what I wanted," I asked. "You do not understand what I mean by will," he replied. That was when a cascade of memories tumbled into my awareness. I saw myself as a child, screaming in horror and kicking, trying desperately to shed my first pair of shoes at the age of 2. I remember, as a 4-year-old, struggling to escape sexual assault by leaving my body and watching from a distance. I remember, in that disembodied state, being lifted up into the clouds, where I met a flock of jeweled birds who recognized me as one of them. I remember leaving my body when my father assaulted and tortured me as a child, and how I would visit my bird friends on those occasions. I remember a screened door creaking open and the smell of pie, still warm in a napkin, as my mother handed it to me through the back door. During the NDE, I remember experiencing unconditional love, the love that taught me that all suffering is redeemed by love, the love that reminded me that only love is real. It was the love that forgives unconditionally, it was the love as the providence of suffering, that made suffering worthwhile. I laughed as I realized that the sense of self that I experienced on Earth was nothing more than an illusion. I had incarnated in a body to suffer so that I could learn to forgive all people, even though none of what I experienced while in the body was real. The divine play, as I regarded it from my point of abstraction, was hysterical to me. Michael showed me that the world was nothing more than a dream. It was all a dream in which the Son of God was made captive by the very world he created. And love was the only thing that could undo the spell of believing in that terribly poignant, terribly beautiful, and yet silly dream. Then suddenly, I remembered all the people who loved me. I recalled their suffering and their love for me. I recalled how they hated themselves for the pain they had caused me. I remembered my father weeping and begging for my forgiveness time after time, and how my pain was his own. Not wanting him to suffer, I remembered loving him with my whole heart, setting my hurt and indignation completely aside. I remembered how much he loved me for bringing him home to love and to the experience of tenderness as we grew together. From my vantage point, I was able to feel the world's suffering, and I knew that none of it was real. The joke was as tragic as it was funny, and Michael and I wept and laughed together for an eternal instant. "Summon your will," Michael ordered, and it was his command that made me realize that I had to return to Earth. I remembered that I and others like myself had come to Earth as a wave of souls who came to Earth to practice summoning our will. We made our will the will of God, and it was God's will that we were to awaken from the dream, that we were to bring down the kingdom of God to the earth so that all living beings might be freed from their mental prison. It was God's will that all living beings were to awaken from the dream so that we might all laugh together. "Am I dying?" I asked. "Your body is dying. It is lying on the ground dying, and unless you can make it stand up, it will die," he replied. I knew I had to return, but I didn't know where my body was. How does one return to a place that, in essence, is only a dream? I wondered in a panic. The panic became a fierce assertion of my will, and it was the force of my will that carried me back to my body. I have been like a hermit in this world for years now, waiting for the time to be right and wondering if it will ever be right. My family and the world succeeded in convincing me that all of what I experienced during my NDE was not real, and for the longest time, I lived a life that negated all that I learned during my NDE. No one cared that their life here was just a dream, and to even consider the possibility was disconcerting to most people, so I stopped talking about what I had learned during my NDE. When my dad died, everything changed. His death ignited a fire within me to bring to fruition what I returned to Earth to achieve. I want to make the most of the years that remain for me so that when I pass from this world, I can be at peace knowing that I did my best to carry out the mission I gave myself to complete. I want to move forward, carrying out the will of God as my will, with the loving presence of Michael at my side. I would like to say to everyone in the world that you are not who you think you are. You are love. Love is all there is, and our true self is an eternal being that exists in the temporal world and in heaven. I would like everyone to know that since love is all you can take with you when you leave this world, only love is real. Be courageous in the face of loss or sacrifice, remember love, and act in accord with love, and it will make whatever you endure here on earth vibrant with the grace and presence of God, a presence that will bestow happiness upon you. We will all laugh together about this life in the sweet by and by. Until then, be of good cheer, for the end of all this dreaming is near.